morning, everybody, wherever you are. My name's Kevin Turvey, but you can call me Kevin Turvey.
The English Midlands, home of flattened vowels, concrete, and an accent that sounds like a depressed beetle. Stereotypically an unlovely urban industrial part of the world, but home over the years to some of the best, most important and most memorable ITV presentation and programming in its history. I could narrate the whole programme like this, but quite frankly it's already getting to be more trouble than it's worth to keep it up, so I don't think I'll bother. Oh, that's better. The Midlands. The Midlands was one of the original 3 franchise areas that began ITV, alongside London and the North, the 3 most populous and prosperous parts of the country. The sticks could bloody well wait until the 60s. This original flavour ITV consisted of 6 franchises altogether, with weekends and weekdays being separate but equal because of reasons. London was the first to launch in September of 1955, and the Midlands came second the following February. The franchise winners were, on weekends, ABC, one of several cinema chains currently investing in the new market, and on weekdays, ABC. Wait, what? The second ABC was the result of 2 consortia clashing, that of Norman Collins, former controller of BBC TV, and Lew Grade, a sort of vaudeville Wilson Fisk, who was so utterly showbiz he probably bled neon and excreted glitter. Much like what would happen 13 years later when they invented the Yorkshire franchise, the ITA were faced with a station whose operator, Collins's Associated Broadcasting Development Company, had unexpectedly turned out to be Boracic Flint, only after being awarded the franchise. Meanwhile, ITC, run by Grade and fellow variety impresario Prince Littler, had the cash, but had originally lost the race due to the fact that Grade and Littler, alongside various others in the company, including Grade's brother Leslie, were talent agents as well as company directors. You see how personal conflicts of interest could arise. But when Collins's firm started to flounder, these issues somehow ceased to be issues, and just as they would later in Yorkshire, the ITA allowed the 2 companies to merge together to form the Associated Broadcasting Company, or ABC. Grade was put in charge of the merged company, with Collins playing Clegg to his Cameron, up to and including the bit where he's destroyed by his superior and ultimately vanishes altogether. A new and soon-to-be iconic logo was drawn up, and ABC was ready to go. Except that there already was an ABC, of course, and in the same region even. Not helping matters was the fact that the cinema chain's full name was Associated British Corporation, making the new ABC seem even more unoriginal. A minor legal squabble ensued, at the end of which it was determined that since Associated British got there first, it would be the new guys who would have to come up with a new name. And so the Associated Broadcasting Company became Associated Television, ATV, and the logo retailored with the new letters. The shadowed eye was a takeoff of the looming CBS eye mark, although which company is intended to be cast in which as a shadow was ambiguous. If the version you're looking at now seems a bit odd to you in comparison with the more classic version, or indeed the original logo as designed for ABC, look, the proportions are all out of whack. Well, the reason for this, apparently, is that the name change came along on relatively short notice, leaving some poor sod to put together a new ATV ident in a hurry, and he got the dimensions wrong. But this was the 50s. Brand integrity and psychotically rigid style guidelines hadn't been invented yet. And you get the point. ATV. Associated Telly. Vision? And of course this ident would also have been seen in London at the weekends, while in the Midlands Saturday and Sunday were graced with this stern little animation. Percussion. It's not just for rhythm anymore. Poor old ABC, as it transpired, never operated a weekday franchise. Just weekends in the North and the Midlands for the first 12 years of ITV. Still, they were no slouch in the presentation department, despite only having time for 2 idents. The first was powerful, but the second, despite essentially just being an adaptation of the original, was positively eerie, as the disturbingly Yonic logo looms V of Doom-like right into your face and beyond. A lot of idents in those days had the logo zooming in because it was a simple animation, but ABC were one of the only ones to have it zoom straight past the screen into your face and head and mind. Meanwhile, the presentation department of their weekday counterparts had been keeping itself busy. Not wanting to stick with the out of proportion logo too long, before the 50s were out they were using this slightly busy modernist piece, which flaunted the station's franchises in the viewers' faces. That one looked just a touch too much like a test card, however, and by the time the 60s had begun in earnest, the main ident was focused once more on the shadowed eye, occasionally accompanied by an ITA placating acknowledgement of their broadcast region. Both ATV and ABC made use of a 3-note motif to go with their 3-letter names, although ABC had the cutting edge because their 3 notes are actually the notes A, B and C. Sadly, the scale doesn't go as far as T, let alone V. The other advantage ABC had was that their version ran through it twice, once on xylophone and once on bass drum for emphasis. It took a former goon to hit on the idea of doing it 4 times. The occasion for the newest alteration was the 1968 ITA reshuffle, which among other things resulted in weekend franchises being abolished, except in London where it continued as a sort of anachronism until ITV's ultimate homogenisation. This was obviously bad news for ABC, who therefore lost both their franchises through no fault of their own. It got even worse for them when they unexpectedly lost the bid for the London Weekend franchise, but that's another story. ATV now ruled the Midland Roost 7 days a week, and to celebrate, a brash new ident was created, along with a new jingle composed by Jack Parnell and arranged by the semi-legendary Wally Stott, the future Angela Morley, then best known as the musical director for The Goon Show. The 3-note motif, so as to subliminally say ATV inside the listener's head every time, remained, but this time it was injected with huge boxes of confidence. And why not? Because with the whole week to play in and the impending arrival of colour, ATV could now really establish itself as one of the biggest players not only on ITV but in the British television industry itself. Noting the eventual arrival of colour broadcasting, Lew Grade commissioned a vast complex in Birmingham to serve as ATV's regional staging post. This is as good a time as any to give a salute to ATV's faces. Their particular specialty was the smooth, slightly arched playboy with the motionless hair and the often permanently arched eyebrows, as exemplified in the likes of Kevin Morrison, Tom Edwards, and especially the Silver Fox Mike Prince, ATV's Ian Sterling analogue. Arguably the main face of ATV, however, belonged to the late Shaw Taylor, who died just a few months ago at the age of about 250. An instantly likeable presence on screen, unless you were a criminal, Taylor made his television debut as an ATV announcer and kept coming back ever since in various capacities, including episodes of Police 5. With a newly christened ATV Centre in Birmingham complementing the existing studios at Elstree, ATV started to churn out some of the best and or most iconic television of the 1970s. all that great television needed a great ident to go with it, and once colour was a go in 1969, that was what it got. Meet Zoom 2. Can't watch it just once. In an age where most television companies chose to embrace colour by merely substituting either white or black for blue, so as not to push the system too hard, ATV went in the other direction and tried to cram in as much of the visible spectrum as they possibly could within 10 seconds. Remember, this is the age of mechanical idents, made with such as levers and pulley systems. Machinery is involved in this one too, but much less visibly, and in a way that makes the ident seem completely different and completely unique. Barely describable, faintly psychedelic, and all falling into place at the end with the shadowed eye. All accompanied by the complete version of the Waddy Stott arranged jingle. This was just after Stott's stint as arranger and conductor on the sainted Scott Walker tetralogy. As Angela Morley, she would go on to co-score Watership Down and become one of John Williams' most trusted collaborators. When she died in 2009 at the age of 84, mentioned alongside all the Emmy Awards and Oscar nominations in the front rank of her achievements was this 10-second 12-note arrangement for brass, drums and vibes that brooked absolutely no argument that this was the best television station in the entire goddamn world. It might just be the greatest British ident ever made, and represents something of a golden age in British television. Sadly, there's one thing we all know about golden ages. They end. ATV made some great programmes. Only a fool or a charlatan would try to deny that. But questions were starting to be asked by the newly renamed IBA about their commitment to their region. Yes, they built that huge tower in Birmingham, but their main headquarters remained the original complex in Elstree, nowhere near their franchise region. And when they did deign to make local programming, it usually concentrated almost exclusively on Birmingham, rarely giving anywhere east of, say, Warwick the time of day. So desultory was their local service, in fact, that they skirted the edges of being in breach of their contract with the IBA. So when the 1980 franchise round came along, the regulators added extra specifications for the Midlands licence. The winners had to be exclusively based in the region and have separate facilities for the East and West Midlands. By now, Lew Grade had consolidated all his interests under the Associated Communications Corporation, of which ATV was a subsidiary. When the 1980 franchise round came along, the ACC gave birth to a new shell company under the name of ATV Midlands, specifically to bid for it on the ACC's behalf. They won, but they won with conditions. Conditions which ultimately meant they might as well have lost. The ACC had to divest themselves of 51% of the company. They were to have no executive control. The studios at Elstree would be sold, ultimately to the BBC. In its place, they were to build a new studio to serve the east of the region, which turned out to be in Nottingham. And finally, why don't you just go ahead and change the name for good measure, just to demonstrate that this is a completely different company? So that's what they did. On that fateful December the 31st, 1981, ATV went gently into that good night, with a final sit-down interview with Shaw Taylor, sharing his memories of the station, and a gracious final close-down.
The time now, 32 minutes and 53 seconds past midnight. Have a peaceful night, and I hope you enjoy New Year's Day.
They were keen to stress that technically, legally, the new station was to be still ATV in all but name. But the harsh reality was, with almost all links to Lew Grade's company forcibly severed, there was no way anyone could honestly claim that it was just the name that was changing. When the ACC finally divested themselves of the company after a little over a year, amidst lots of boardroom infighting, it was just the final life support systems shutting down. For all intents and purposes, ATV was dead. And for viewers between the marches in the North Sea, on January the 1st, 1982, something very strange happened.
Good morning. This is Central, which provides your programmes on the Midlands transmitters of the Independent Broadcasting Authority.
Welcome to 1982. Welcome to Central, a new name in British television, with a fresh approach to the east and west of this dual region. To begin the new year, let's take a look.
After a series of fake news reports about a UFO being sighted above Broad Street, Central Television began with said UFO exploding into light, accompanied by a strange tinkling jingle that sounded vaguely like an alien baby's mobile. Oh wait, did I say Central Television? I meant Central Independent Television. The company's slightly unwieldy full name was the result of some chancer registering every permutation of the words Central and Television he could think of as a trademark, in the hopes that the actual company bearing that name would have to buy it off him. Very much a douche ahead of his time. No doubt 20 years later he came up with the phrase, "what you need when you need it," found a file photograph of a smiling woman, and really started raking it in. Unfortunately for him at the time, the word independent never occurred to him, so Central didn't have to pay him a penny. The original spheroid ident wasn't exactly popular at the time. In fact, it was quite heavily derided. No doubt this is partly because it replaced Zoom 2, which ATV had never dropped. When the preceding act is Led Zeppelin circa 1974, no one short of Christ could really come off well. It probably didn't help that it was so odd, so unlike anything that had come before. Channel 4 hasn't happened yet, but even if it had, it wouldn't provide any more context for listening. It was a bit like the Martian equivalent of BBC One, and as a way of announcing your new station, it was brilliant. One problem: a big static sphere with a shadow on it isn't particularly flexible, which is why the actual logo itself, for letterhead purposes and the like, looked like this. Inevitably, after a couple of years, the ident was flattened out and rainbow coloured to more closely resemble it. The rainbow provided a suitable visual hook on which to hang Central's identity, and they use it everywhere, including inside the InVision continuity booths. For the record, these were mostly populated by the same people as under ATV, and as the years went on became an increasingly rare sight, until by 1987 the whole concept was abandoned altogether. Around the same time, the central disc was completing a mutation it had been undergoing for some time. With the rainbow motif to work with, Central's presentation department went into overdrive. Mix in the new wave of flying CGI idents, and what you end up with is mad, wild genius. Shortly after the rainbow disc acceded to the ident throne, a young pretender made its debut in trailers and promotions, and quickly rose to depose it. It was known as the Cake. Essentially, the Cake was a segmented, cylindrical version of the rainbow logo. But those 6 lines made a massive difference. Instead of bleary watercoloured homogeny, the colours were now individualised, standing out from each other. More importantly, the segmented nature gave the logo the impression of motion, even when it was just standing there. It wasn't long before the Cake replaced the disc altogether. For want of a better word, that was a sort of generic ident for Central. It was seen on production captions and the like as a basic identifier of the station, but it was by no means the only way the cake would form up on Midland screens. It was far too flexible and, more importantly, far too much fun to play with for that. If a logo could have ADHD, here's your test case for Ritalin. There was even, in a pretty rare move, an ident that incorporated the unofficial ITV wordmark, albeit fairly clumsily, which would turn out to be eerily prescient. By the time 1989 came along, Central were on a roll, churning out idents left, right and centre. The generic look was just grist to the mill, and inevitably Central gave its own twist to it. First they substituted their jingle, introduced with the cake, for the Dundas tune, and then they just stuck the ITV animation in the corner of their own ident. And then they gave up completely. And not just on the generic look. As the 90s dawned, the whole notion of a single unifying ident went out the window as the cake went into overdrive, adopting a series of surreal, abstract, or just plain daft disguises and scenarios. With IVC now firmly in the past, the ident became a conduit for various bits of continuity business above and beyond just announcing what was on next, and the cake itself became the computer-generated in-vision announcer. Central were undoubtedly helped in this by an extraordinary stroke of luck in the 1991 franchise round. Their region was the only one in England to go unopposed, allowing them to win by default on a bid of a measly £2,000 a year. Which isn't to say they got away with it completely. They got bit by the other half of the Broadcasting Act. But we'll get back to that. Bolstered by having all the budgetary elbow room it needed, over the next few years that cake did it all. There was the cake, decorated by confetti. The cake as ITV logo-based transformer. The cake as some kind of sand sculpture, I think. The cake as Astrolabe. The cake as some kind of holographic sports projector. The cake in an homage to Derek Jarman's Blue. As the technology improved, so did the idents. The cake as latter-day Channel 4 ident. The cake as MC Escher painting. The cake as some sort of inflatable thing. I'm not actually sure what this is. Is that a hot air balloon? The cake on fire. The cake underwater. The cake as Formula 1 race car. The cake as cityscape. The cake as optical illusion. The cake as itself. The cake as party machine. The cake as backdrop for a British gas advert. The cake is... oh wait, hang on, no.
Tom Jones sings, Jim Davidson tells a few jokes. Let's hope Lennox Lewis just wants to chat. Des O'Connor tonight.
How dare you take the cake!
What was that I said about Golden Ages? What was that other thing I said about the Broadcasting Act? As of 1994, a single company was permitted to own a controlling stake in as many ITV stations as it damn pleased, completely negating the whole point of ITV in the first place. Mere nanoseconds into 1994, Central were bought lock, stock and barrel by a company who already owned 20% of them and had since 1987. Carlton. Carlton proceeded to downsize the station heavily, removing the Nottingham branch altogether and moving out of the old ATV centre in Birmingham, misplacing 140 jobs in the process, in favour of a smaller, cheaper complex down the road. But at least they kept the cake for a few years, recognising how popular and successful it was as a symbol. But eventually it was decided that it was just too confusing for the poor little viewers to see a Carlton company underneath a Central production, and having to comprehend the notion of one company owning another company what is providing them pictures on the telly box. After all, we all remember the spate of mass suicides in the Yorkshire and Tyne regions in the mid-70s, as thousands of ITV viewers dashed their brains out on their own linoleum floors in sheer bewilderment at the idea of Trident television. Or rather, we don't, because that didn't happen, because despite what Carlton would seem to believe, television viewers are not drooling empathetic livestock. At least not until they were being treated like it, which may have been Carlton's plan from the beginning. And so in 1998 the cake was driven to a field outside Redditch and humanely shot through the head, metaphorically speaking, to be replaced by these calculated attempts at cuteness, which gave off the unmistakable aroma of the boardroom of an advertising company. Not only were these idents heavy-handed, unattractive and patronising, they were second-hand. With one obvious difference, these are the exact same as the idents Carlton have been using in London since 1996. Impossibly, these idents were made by Lambie friggin Nairn. I can only assume Martin Lambie Nairn himself was busy working on the forthcoming BBC relaunch, and that these were hurriedly sketched out by the work experience mailroom kid, or his dog, or something. So not only did Carlton take the cake away and replace it with something a billionth as good, they didn't even let Central have their own identity. They dressed them up in their big brother's hand-me-downs. I'd even assume keeping the name was something of an oversight, and one they rectified before long.
You're watching Carlton. It's time now for the latest Central News.
These are the life stories of ITV channels, and life stories inevitably have to end in death. I just wish they didn't have to end in humiliation as well. The really galling thing is that this set of idents, Carlton's spoiler from the 1999 generic look, were actually pretty good. But then, marketing and business were always Carlton's strongest suit. Programming and broadcasting, more of a means to an end. By 2000, ITV in the Midlands had come full circle. Their station was a gigantic company with money to spare and no particular interest in the region itself. The difference was, ATV made some classic television, while Carlton made Bushel on the box. And that's the one thing Carlton can't take away. It can destroy the present, it can control the future, but it can't destroy the past.
Yesterday I was happy to play for a penny or two a song, till a fella in a black sedan took a shine to my one-man band. He said, "We got plans for you, you'd never dream